Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honor to share with you information, news, analysis about what's going on in Mexico since 2005. So I really appreciate you joining me this weekend, especially this weekend, since it's been such a, there's been a lot of very interesting news, political news regarding the future of Mexico's opposition, and trying to understand or get a better sense as to how President Andrés Manuel López Obrador views himself in terms of his legacy in history. So I really appreciate today's guest. He's been joining me throughout the years, Federico Berrueto. If you've been following this show in the last couple of years, you know exactly who he is. He's a very well-known political analyst. He's been helping us throughout the years with polls and analysis regarding Mexico's politics. Once again, Federico, welcome to the show. Well, I think we have to start this conversation talking about this new organization that was created, or at least was announced this week. It's not a political party, but it is clearly political in nature, and it's an organization that includes a lot of very interesting Mexican politicians with a lot of experience, but clearly their position is antagonic. I mean, they clearly are in opposition against Andrés Manuel López Obrador and getting ready for the 2024 elections. So let's start. Let's talk about this group. I believe its name is Mexico Conecta. What's your reaction to what happened this week in regards to the presentation of this group and the future of this group? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Well, actually, I have mixed feelings about it. First of all, I think it's very important that to see that sort of people involved in active politics. And I think it's a good idea. And I think Mexican politics needs that sort of people to be involved, to speak out what's going on and what is the view of all of them about the Mexican future. However, what I can see is that, well, there is a difference between the people that belongs to that group and the leaders of that group. It's not clear who is or who are the leaders of that group. And I think the Cárdenas affair, that's Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, that was a leading figure of that group. At last moment, he didn't show up. And it was quite embarrassing. But as far as we know, he already told them that he was not going to work with them. I don't know why, the reason, or why they went on with the idea that Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas was working with them. And the main reason that I don't like the way that they started, it is because they didn't fix position. They didn't say anything about two things that are crucial. First of all, the event that is going to, the public event of the 26th of February, that is to say, a lot of civil organizations, they asked people to be in Zócalo of Mexico City.
Well, not only in Mexico City, but also they are around the country.
I think 50 cities in the country. Right. And we remember that the 13th of November last year, there was a huge demonstration, not only in Mexico City, but in many cities of the country. And it was a success. And because the government or the regime went on with the idea to, let's say, to affect, to damage the electoral institutions, well, what we expect is that the people, again, they are going to show up in a huge numbers the 26th of February. And what I didn't like is that that collective didn't say anything
about that.
Yeah,
See,
and
that's I'm sorry,
sorry.
continue.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, and also, I think the other aspect is, well, the electoral reform, the attempt of the regime to, well, actually to damage the democratic
To weaken
institutions.
the most important
anything about it. And I don't even like that, because you cannot speak up about the future, about politics, if you don't deal with those issues.
So let me just kind of summarize what you just said, because this is very interesting. On the one hand, you have this group that met this week that had appeared, which clearly it's part of the opposition. It's not clear who the leader is, and it had been announced that Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, who is this leader, who has been the leader on the left side, the leftist leader of Mexico, a very well recognized political figure, highly regarded, who had supported Andrés Manuel López Obrador in his moment. I mean, López Obrador owes his political career to Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas. Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas was a candidate, three-time presidential candidate. There's a lot of, there's been a lot of questions about whether he lost, or the elections of 1988 were stolen from him in order to allow Carlos de Salinas to become Mexico's president. So he was supposed to be there, and he wasn't. And it was announced he was going to be there, and he wasn't there. So that's the first question. Your second question is, and I thought that this is very interesting, here this group of the opposition met. They did not talk about the march that is going to take place on February 23rd in order to protect the Federal Electoral Institute. And two, they didn't even talk about the attack against the Federal Electoral Institute. So what was this all about then? What is Mexico Conecta all about then?
Well, I think that they try to be outside of the polarization system or the sentiment. That is to say, they speak out that we have to work with in a way that not be located in a situation of antagonism to the government. And I think that's a mistake. That's a mistake, because if you are in politics, you have to have a definition of what's going on with the Mexican democracy and what's going on with the regime. For instance, we have a problem, Ana Maria, with the militaries.
And the militarization of Mexico society,
also,
of the country.
Another issue, the organized crime, the drug lords involved in politics.
Well,
you have to speak about that. And nobody, and a word was not referred to those issues. So if they think that to be in a way that is not constructive, and you don't face those sort of issues, well, you're outside of the problems that worries the people that ask for a change of the regime. I don't know. There is no middle way, is what I want to say. It's very difficult to go in a middle way when the reality of the Mexican society is a society that is, well, in favor or against.
So it's very interesting what you're saying, because basically that's what President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said during his morning conference when he was asked about this organization and Mexico Conecta and the possible participation of this beloved figure, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas. Basically, the president said something very similar. He said, basically, either you are against el pueblo, against the people, which is him, or you're with, or either you're with the people or against them. basically saying either you're with the president or against him, and there's no middle road, and he kind of underlined that. So I guess the question is, with this group, isn't this group dividing the opposition even more, even though it seems to be trying to distance itself from the inner partisan fights? I mean, the parties are fighting among themselves. There was a lot of examples this week of this. I mean, is this going to work? I mean, isn't this kind of this division, this is dividing the opposition even more?
I don't think so. I sympathize with the idea that moderates go into politics, and even in a moderate way. I think this is not a damage, not of the opposition, not Mexican politics. I think it's a good thing that that sort of initiatives went on. However, the polarization system is not about the oligarchy versus the people. No, it's about democracy. And because it's about democracy, all the different political parties, even parties that historically are against each other, have to go together, because the problem is that we are facing an amenaza, how do you call it?
A threat,
yes, a threat to the democratic system.
Right.
And I can show it in a very easy way, how the government or López Obrador is from the anti-democratic side, and, well, let's say the opposition is in the other side. If we look, where is Manuel Bartlett? Manuel Bartlett was the architect of the electoral fraud in '88 when Cárdenas was president, and all people say that it was the starting point of the democratic transition. Well, where is Manuel Bartlett? And remember, Bartlett is not only an electoral frauder. He, when he was a minister of interior, there was a killing of one of the main journalists, that Buendia. Right. And there is another killing or assassination that is of Kiki Camarena.
Right.
Manuel Bartlett cannot go to the States because he is facing, at least he's suspected. I mean, it's not proven that he was the author of those killings, but there is some ground to think about it. But also the electoral fraud.
Right.
So, where is Manuel Bartlett? Well, Manuel Bartlett is within López Obrador, or rather, López Obrador is with Manuel Bartlett, and he's not with, let's say, Cárdenas. López Obrador is not with the democratic side of the spectrum, political spectrum. So I think that there is a problem, and now in Mexican politics, it's very difficult to for a middle ground when the democracy is at the center of the discussion, and not only the discussion, I mean in a discursive way. The democracy is threatened by the regime, and it's a reality. That's a reality because, well, we have an electoral reform that goes against all what is being done since the '88.
Let's do this. I've got to go to commercial break, but when we come back, I would like to continue our conversation, and I would like to talk about Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas and Bartlett and the threat that this reform represents to having elections in Mexico, elections that assure that the winner is the person who gets the most votes, and not elections that are being where you can steal the elections, but also that is being kind of I don't know, organized by the government, the way it was in the 80s and in the 90s. So could you please stick around? We're going to go to commercial break. You're listening to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and I'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's topic is the what's happening with the opposition, the creation of this new group called Mexico Conecta that has a very interesting list of very well-known Mexican politicians with a lot of experience who appear to try to distance themselves from the traditional parties, those that are in the opposition, in part because there's a lot of infighting going on in these parties. Joining us today is Federico Berrueto. Before we went to a commercial break, you kind of gave us a really interesting description of the problems that this organization has at this point, considering it was just created, it was just announced. And you, Federico, basically underlying part of the problem is nobody's really clear who's the leader. Two, they really haven't spoken about the two big issues or three big issues that most affect the elections right now, which is this reform to the National Electoral Institute that could potentially weaken the ability of the National Electoral Institute, el INE, known in Spanish, to be able to supervise elections, assure that there is no fraud taking place. And this other issue, of course, the involvement of organized crime in the electoral process. And of course, they didn't talk about that. And then there was this very interesting exchange by President Andrés Manuel López Obrador when he was asked about this Mexico Conecta, and where there was this belief that this beloved political figure, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, was part of this organization, and Andrés Manuel López Obrador distanced himself from Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, which is quite shocking when you consider who Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas is and what he represents for Mexico's fight to be able to eventually have a president on the left side of the political spectrum. So could you just briefly describe to our audience who Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas is, for those who are too young to remember that electoral process, and who he is?
Well, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, let's say, is a son of a very highly regarded president. He was President Lázaro Cárdenas from 34 to 40, that's to say before the Second World War. And it was a president that is regarded historically as a very important figure in the social reform of Mexico, and also a very nationalistic figure. So many people see Lázaro Cárdenas as sort of a hero, or let's say an historic figure, let's say that. And Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, it looks like the follower of that view of Mexico, that's to say the social aspect and the nationalistic and nationalism. And he belonged to the PRI. He was actually governor of Michoacan. And then with Porfirio Muñoz Ledo, they broke with the PRI, and they started to construct a political movement that led to Cárdenas' candidacy to 88. The elections of 88, that was won by Salinas de Gortari, a very polemic result. And because, well, we didn't have a electoral system, a reliable electoral system.
It was run by the government.
Yeah,
it was run by the government. We did not get results until a week later. Nobody really knew what had happened. I mean, there's a sense that Bartlett, the current general director of the Federal Electricity Commission, stole the elections. He was the Secretary of Gobernación. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yes, there is a consensus, at least that there was not a fair election, not transparent, and to some basic problems. And even though Cárdenas got a very, very good result. So from then on, the regime worked with the opposition in order to change the electoral system. And it was a very successful change. I mean, for Salinas' government, Cedillo's government mainly, And we transformed Mexican politics and democracy. I think we went into democracy in a quite successful way. And in perspective, it started with the campaign of Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas. It was not the only figure, but it's the leading figure, and even the election of '88 has that symbolic power.
Well, I have to tell you a story. 20 years ago, up to like this month, I was participating in a TV show. I was a very young, I was very new to TV, with Guillermo Ortega. The show's name was Voto por Voto. And for the first time, we were able to get together Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, Manuel Bartlett, and the panista, I'll remember his name right now.
Castillo Peraza?
No, Ceballos.
Diego Fernández de Ceballos.
Diego Fernández de Ceballos in the same table. And I asked the question, what happened in 1988? And it was the first time that both Cuauhtémoc and Manuel were at the table in the same room, right? In the same TV show. And it was, I'm actually looking for the video of that show, because Bartlett insisted that it was a technical problem. Cuauhtémoc insisted that the elections had been stolen. And that's why it's so amazing what happened this week with President Andrés Manuel López Obrador distancing himself from Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, reminding us all that Manuel Bartlett is part of his his team of his advisors, and has been promoting this vision of nationalistic view of the energy reform. We can talk about that in another show, but it's just a reminder of how the distance between Andrés Manuel López Obrador and Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas and has been just strength. I mean, it's there, and there's no political costs for Andrés Manuel López Obrador. And two, I don't know, and I have to ask you this question: why isn't Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas defending the National Electoral Institute, considering what happened to him?
Well, Ana Maria, I have to tell you something that is not very nice to hear. And from the bottom of Mexican society, we are not, we are not a democratic society. That is to say, we didn't develop the citizenship, the way of life, to care about liberty, to care about how the rule of law. We don't care about many things that are basic for a democratic system. But I have to tell you this, is that many people are very happy with the authoritarian move of López Obrador. Because the problem is not only with López Obrador, but also with Mexican society. So at this moment, you can see a very authoritarian course of Mexican politics, but also a lot of support of the Presidente López Obrador. And to that context, where is Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas? And I think for him it's very difficult. Of course, he doesn't share the politics, Andrés Manuel López Obrador politics or decisions,
he does
even
not,
the way that he deals with democracy, with many things that are to do or are not going on now in Mexican politics. He doesn't share it. But I think he does, because he has the view that 2 years are a small span of time in order to go against what many people see as a left movement. López Obrador doesn't belong to the left. López Obrador, even, he doesn't care about democracy. It's very different from Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas. But I think the view of Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas is, in 2 years, López Obrador is going to be history. So for him, I suppose, there is no reason to be in struggle against a president that, well, so I suppose that Cárdenas knows where is going to be López Obrador after he ends the presidency. And I think the condition of Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, even though that he wasn't a president, or he was not president,
Mhm.
even though his, let's say, his prestige, political prestige, goes much more higher than the
Then
one of López Obrador, because López Obrador has it because he has the power, but he's going to lose it.
he's going to lose that.
Yeah.
Hopefully in 2 years. Well, anyway, I wrote about this in a column this week for El Financiero. I'm going to be tweeting that later on. And you also wrote a very interesting column that I think our audience would enjoy reading. Where can they read your columns, Federico?
Well, my column has to be the loss of memory of the people that are now in politics. That is to say, López Obrador, he said that he didn't know that Cárdenas already didn't belong to that group. So
I know it's crazy.
The Claudia Sheinbaum, that very surely she is going to be the candidate of the Morena.
I don't know. I'm not too sure, well, but we'll see.
At least if in this moment the decision was taken, very surely she would be the candidate. Well, she said the same. And also the organizers of the event, well, they went to the press to say, we don't know why.
Why? He was, I know.
And you know, on Friday, 3 days before, a leading columnist, Mario Maldonado, wrote that Cárdenas was not going to be there because he didn't share the view of the whole collective group. Well, really, it's sorry.
It's a great piece. People have to, they definitely have to read it. Now also we'll retweet it so people have access to it. I really enjoy your columns, your op-ed pieces. Thank you so much for joining us. And clearly we're going to have a lot to talk about this year as we're heading for presidential elections in 1 year from now. I mean, campaigns, there's going to be campaigns taking place 1 year from now. So I really appreciate you joining us, Federico Berrueto, very well-known political analyst. He's been joining us throughout the years. I always enjoy having a long conversation with him. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar.